Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to part 2 of this 2-part series for the MERN stack where we create a multi-step form. In this part of this video, we are just going to work on the back end. We have already done the front end code with using React and creating a React app. If you want to check out the video, I'm going to link it right here above, or you could just check it out on my channel. It's called the same thing, just including part 1. So let's just hop right into it. Okay guys, so let me take you into my screen and share it with you. Okay, so right now we have the client running here in the development server right here on the right, showing the actual UI and application. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to open up another terminal window and we're going to cd into the API, which is the backend folder I set up. Inside of this backend folder, we need to install a dev dependency called Nodemon. And this allows us to always keep track of changes made on the server. So it should be npm i-d Nodemon. So just to make sure everything was installed, we'll go check the package.json and the dev dependency shows Nodemon. Okay, inside of the API folder, we also want to create a main file, which is going to be pretty much the parent file. We will call this index.js. So index.js. And then inside of API, we also want to install Express. So that'll be the first package we are going to install. npm install Express. Make sure you're in the API folder. Should be installed. Is installed as a dependency. Awesome. And now we just want to bring Express into our application now. So const express equals require express, and then we have to initialize it as well. So we could do app. Oops, my fault. I don't know why I did that. Const app equals express as a function. Awesome. Okay, after we installed Express, the Express package, we do have other packages to install, but we're just going to install them as we go and as we need them. So the next thing is we want to make sure our routes are set up, and we're going to do a quick test real quick. So we're going to do app.get, then parentheses, we're going to go to /test. And then parameters, we're going to set request and response into an arrow function. And then we just want to respond with the JSON, and we could just put test works. Okay. Now after this, we do need our app to listen to somewhere. So we're going to do app.listen. And then the port we could use say port 4000. Okay. So now we're just going to open up a different tab, localhost 4000 /test. You know why that didn't work? Because we don't have Nodemon running. We don't have the server running at all. So let me do Nodemon index.js. All right, our server's running. Now let me refresh it. And then test works, as you guys can see here. Now we're going to go into one of our front end files, which is going to be the register page inside of our client. And what we're going to do here is we are just going to go to the form. Let me close all this up. Control B. And inside of this form, we are going to have a function called RegisterUser. Equals an arrow function. And then this is going to take in an event, because the first thing we want is a prevent default. Prevent default. Okay. And the next thing we need to do is we need to also install another package on the client side called Axios. So I'm going to open up another terminal, cd into client, and then npm install Axios. Okay, it's installed now on our client side. I'm going to import it. Import Axios from Axios. Okay, now we're going to go back inside the register user function. And where I'm doing this inside the form file because this is our parent on the form inside of our client side. This is where that submit button is going to be. And on click, we're going to call the register function. I'm going to go ahead and put the register user function inside of this on click and make sure it is inside this type of code right here where it says if the page length is the last page, because that is going to be the submit button. So all we have to do is call the register user and then make it a function. There we go. So when we click this button, this function should run. And what I want to put in this function is I just want to test it out. So we're going to do axios.get, and we could do http://localhost 4000. Isn't that what I named it? 4000? Yes, 4000/test. This might not work because we have to still install course, but we're going to test this out real quick. So we're going to go back to our main application. Just type in random stuff here. Open up the console. Make sure we go inside of network. And then when we click the submit button, form submitted. Let me just make sure everything's working. Cannot read properties of prevent default. Okay, so the reason why is because we're not passing the event inside of the register user. So let's try this again. So yeah, we're getting a failed 200 error, so everything works. Let me actually refresh this so this clears the console and show you this again. So we press submit, form submitted. We get all the data of the random stuff I typed, and we're getting an error, which is a 200. It's a failed error. So if we go inside the network, it's a course error. Yeah. So all we have to do is we have to install the package of course inside of our backend, and this should fix the error. Okay, so let's go down to our terminal and make sure we're in the API terminal. So we can open up another one if we need to. CD API. And we're going to npm install course. So now that should be installed, and now we just have to initialize it inside of our index.js. So we could put const course equals require and then course. Okay, and then we just have to initialize it down here. So we're going to put app.use, and then we're going to make sure we pass in an object as a parameter. And we need to make sure the credentials are true. And the origin must be the URL of the front end, which is localhost 3000. So I'm just going to copy and paste, and there we go. Credentials, I think it's just with the S. App.use, credentials. Oh, it's because I forgot to put course. So don't write it like that, write it like this, course. Then it's an object. And then we'll put all this inside of the object. And it should be credentials. Blank. There we go. Okay, so now let's test this out again. So we shouldn't get an error when it comes to it now. submit. And we still do get an error. Let me actually refresh. Actually, So on the form, we have localhost 4000 /test event.prevol. And then inside the index, we have this. It's require course. Credentials true, and then origin, localhost 3000. Let me take the slash off, that might be why. Control S. Okay. Let's refresh this. Type in whatever. And we should not get any errors. There we go. So make sure you don't have a slash at the end of the localhost 3000 in your origin, because it is /test. So it'd be like a double slash. There should be no slash here. And as you can see, everything's working. We get a response of test works, and that test works is what we put right here in the app.getTest. And the way we're getting this is because we're clicking the on submit button, and on the on submit button, we're getting a RegisterUser function that's requesting a GET request from this endpoint. Okay, now that we have a working endpoint with a GET request, the next thing I want to do before actually doing a post request is I want to set up Mongoose, the Mongoose database to our backend here, and actually set up everything for that. So we're going to do an npm install Mongoose. Let me make sure I'm spelling that right. I'm not. And make sure this is in the backend folder, which is API. So we're going to install that. And now we just got to initialize it here inside of our index.js file. So we're going to do a const mongoose equals. And then we can make a few folders too, because we're going to need them. And then we're actually going to go on to actual mongoose.com. So in the API folder, we're going to create another folder directory called models. And then inside of models, we're going to create a file called user.js. And this is going to be for Mongoose, is pretty much only this file. So we're also going to have to call Mongoose in here as well. And then we actually need to go and create a project and on Mongoose to actually connect to. Okay, so now I'm on MongoDB. All I'm going to do is I'm either going to create an account and sign up, or just log in an account. So you could either log in with a Google account or a GitHub. Let me just make this a little bigger. Okay, I'm going to log with a Google account. I already have a few projects in here, but we're just going to create a new one just for this video's sake. So the way MongoDB works is it has a bunch of clusters. Oh, I'm in project 0. So for example, here's how it looks. You have a cluster, and you could also browse the collections inside of each cluster that you have. And the collections is where all the data is stored. So we're just going to have to create a brand new one. So when you're logged in, your page looks something similar to this. Right here at the top left, let me zoom in to make sure you see. You're going to have a drop down, and we're going to you could view all projects, or you could do a new project. So we're going to create a new project, and we can name this, I'm going to name it multi-step form. And then next. We don't need to add any members or set permissions for now. You could always come back and do this. I am, whatever the email is, That's going to be the project owner that you're logged into. So we're going to create the project. And then we could add our current IP address. So our current IP address is working. And then now we could also build a database. There's also another option later down this line and steps is where you could add the IP address as well. So if you didn't click that, that's fine as well. So we're going to build the database. And the good thing about Mongo is it is free, especially if you're doing a small project. Obviously, the more storage and data you need to store, you're probably going to have to pay for it. But right now, we could do the free version. We could do the provider as AWS. You could change the region. You could change the region, whatever region you're closest to. I'm on the East Coast, so I'm going to leave it as Virginia. You can name the cluster whatever you want. It says you cannot change the name once the cluster is created, so name it whatever you want. The UI is never going to ever see this, so you can name this whatever you want. I'm just going to keep it as is. And then we're going to press create. And then right here, we can't skip this step because this is important to actually connect MongoDB to your actual application, especially in React. So for username, make it pretty simple. I'm just going to name it B Westwood. Name is something that's familiar to you. And then password, I'm going to just name it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then obviously if you want to see it. And then we are going to create user. And then user is going to be here. And this is information we're going to need later. And then where would you like to connect from? We are going to connect to the local environment for now. Obviously, this is more advanced projects. You're going to have the cloud environment with a bunch of data stored in it. And like I said, if you haven't connected your current IP address, then you could do that here as well. So we're going to finish and close. And then, yeah, we could just press go to databases. And then this should take a few minutes to actually create. So I'll come back to you guys when this is created. Okay, so MongoDB is done creating our database here. And the next step is we're going to connect it to our application. So your page should look something like this, very similar. Next step we're going to do is we're just going to press connect right here. Right here near the left where it says wherever we named our cluster, that's where it's going to be. And we are going to connect our application using, I'm pretty sure it's the drivers. Let me check. It is. So since we're using Node.js, I'm using version 4.1 or later, so check. And the next thing is we're just going to have to add this connection string to our application code. So where we're going to do this is we're going to do it in a .env file. This should not be public to anybody because as you can see right here, it says we need to add our password to make sure it connects. So right now I'm just going to copy this code. I'm going to pull up my VS Code. And inside of the API folder, we're going to create another file called .env. So this is for environment variables, and you can't see it unless you're actually doing it, so it's hidden to the public. And the next thing we're going to do is we are going to name this Mongo _URL. You can name it whatever you want. And you should use all caps because that's just what most people do. It's just common practice. And then we are going to take that copy, which I already did, that code right here, where it says connect your application. And that's what that's going to equal. So we're going to paste it. And then we just need to add in a few things. So if you don't add in your password, your connection is not going to be successful. So right here where it says password, we're going to replace this. And I did an easy password. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So whatever you typed in for your password when we created it, make sure you type it in there. And anytime you touch or edit an env file, you should reset your server. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go into the terminal that's running the server right now. So all you have to do is press Control-C. It stops the server, and then we're going to do Nodemon index.js. Okay. So the server is running again. We could get out of the env folder. And then on the index, which is our parent folder pretty much per se, inside of our backend, we are going to connect Mongo to our application now. And it's very simple to do. All you have to do is just type in here. We already have it imported in. We just have to do mongoose dot connect, and then parentheses, since it's our env folder, we're going to do process dot env, and then whatever you named it. I named it underscore URL. Did I name a URL? I did. And it says our app has crashed. It looks like we ran into a problem. Let me see. .env, mongoose.connect, const mongoose, mongoose. Everything should be good. Let me just stop the server again. And obviously when you're coding, you're always going to be debugging stuff. And let me just see what's going on with here. Okay, so for the reason why the app keeps crashing even after you do mongoose.connect is because if you're doing env files, we need to download a specific package called .env. So we are going to make sure we open up another terminal, cd into the API, and then we're going to npm install .env. This will allow us to use env files inside of our index.js. If you don't do that, it's pretty much a middleware that helps allow for one to go to the other. So we are going to make sure we include it up here. And it's actually a different little syntax. You start with require and then .env. And then at the end of this, we are going to have a .config and then call it as a function. Okay. Now when we go to the API, our server should be running good. Just to make sure, we are going to console.log this process.env .mongo underscore URL. I just want to make sure everything's working. And as you can see here in the terminal, it is console logging our code down here. I don't mind if you see mine because obviously I'm not going to be using this as a actual database, but you definitely don't want other people to see your password and username and stuff like that. So it seems like everything now is working with Mongoose, and we actually have it connected to our application now. So as you can see, make sure you take a good look at this code. So we actually could exit out of MongoDB for now. Actually, we could just minimize the screen. Let's minimize this. We could still leave this up because later on we're going to check to make sure all our data is successfully connected to our database, but we don't need this anymore. And now we have MongoDB connected to our application. We are going to go inside of models, and for MongoDB, we need to make sure we create schemas. Schemas pretty much essentially allow us to create inputs for our application, and then we're going to have to define what those endpoints are going to be as a variable, either a string, it could be a Boolean, a number, just whatever you want, but you got to make sure it's defined. And you could also have other parameters and definitions to what you want it to be done. So we are going to make sure we have schema in here, and we're going to do const schema equals mongoose. So that's from Mongoose. Okay. And then we have to name this. We got to name the schema. So the schema should be something that we're doing. So it's going to be user schema. And this is going to equal a new schema. And then it's going to take a parameter And inside this parameter, we're going to do an object. And now this is where we add all of our state management from the front end, which is like the username, the email, the password. You could do confirm password if you want. First name, last name, address, phone number, favorite food, etc. The only thing I'm not going to do in this tutorial is I'm not going to encrypt the passwords. So most people use bcrypt to encrypt passwords. This isn't a full MERN stack tutorial. I'm just showing you how to do a multi-step form, but I could definitely, and I probably will in the near future, just make a video on bcrypt and how to use it. It's very simple, and that just hashes your passwords. So essentially hackers can't hack you, but obviously it's not hack proof as well. So just keep that in mind. So we're gonna have to take in all of our state management, which first one is username. Let me just make sure everything is right. So we have username, email, password, confirm password, first name, last name, address, phone, food. Okay. So we're going to do username, email, which is a string. And actually for the email must be unique as well. So this is what I was talking about, where you could do different properties. So the type is going to be string. And unique has to be true because we don't want people signing up with the same email. Especially when you do a registration form, you don't want that to happen. Make sure you're also doing commas behind every different line, because if you don't, this is an object and you should have commas in between. You're going to get an error, and it's frustrating when you can't find the error and it's a very simple comma miss. So we're going to have the password, which is a string, first name, string, last name, string. We have address, that's going to be string. And then we have, I think it was just phone. Yep, phone and food. So phone, we could do string, and then food will be string as well. Okay, and the last thing we have to do here is we have to pretty much send this to a collection. So what I mean by that is we browse other collections. Now we need to name the collection inside of our code, which is right here. So what we're going to do with that is we're going to const, and we're going to call this user model. And this is going to equal mongoose dot model. And then the first parameter it takes in is a string. And the string we're going to name this user. So this should be something that you're actually doing. It should associate with whatever you're doing. And then we're going to do user schema, which takes in all of this information. So pretty much our collection name is going to be user. And then we're going to take in all the information here and make sure everything matches up and everything's correct. The only thing we have to do now is we have to export this file so we could use it in other places. So module exports, man, I can't type, equals user model. So we're just exporting this user model, which includes all of this information here. So I'm just press Control S and save all the information. Our server is still running, so that means we have no errors. There's one more thing we can do too, which is actually on the front end to help clean up the code a little bit more. So inside of the register user right here, our function, instead of always calling this localhost 4000/test or whatever we're going to call whatever our endpoint is, we could have a base. So the base is going to be, the base endpoint is going to be localhost 4000. So we could actually remove this, and I'm going to cut it. And then we need to go into our app.js file. And then inside of this file, I'm going to import Axios because we're going to need to use that from Axios. And then right above the function, which is our app, we are going to set a default base URL. And that default base URL is going to be the localhost 4000. So this allows us not to keep typing it anymore. So defaults dash dot base URL, equals a string. Maybe I already had a string. No, I didn't. So localhost 4000. And we're going to also have axios.defaults with credentials. And this is going to be true. So this allows us just to navigate between different URLs. So like our server is on localhost 4000. That's our backend endpoint. But our front-end application is on localhost 3000. So if you didn't install course, you're going to get errors. And then also, if you don't set these default base URLs, you're going to get errors as well. Unless you just keep using it like we did at the beginning, where you could just keep always repeating the URL, but that's just going to clean up the code and make your code look nicer. Okay, so now the next step is inside of our client folder, which is our front-end package, on the actual form, we pretty much got all the state management here, and we put it inside of data. And the way we could use data inside of RegisterUser is we first have to destructure it. We have to destructure all of this, because if you don't destructure all of this inside of the user, you're going to get errors, and it's going to say username is undefined, can't find. So if you don't destructure what I'm about to do, your whole code isn't going to work. So for example, I'm going to show you how to do that now. And one of the things too is when we do functions like this and we're connecting to, say, a backend database, we're going to have to run async await. And the reason for this is because it does take a little bit of time to retrieve or get information or actually send information. So make sure you have a sync, and then we're also going to have a wait as well. So after the prevent default, we are going, let me make sure. First, we're going to destructure everything. So we're going to do const, and then inside we're going to have an object, and then we're going to destructure everything. Username, email, password, first name, last name, address, phone, and food. Okay, so now we destructured all of our data right here. Like I said, that's the way you could do it. You don't have to destructure it if you did everything separately in a different state. So if you had like username and set username, you don't have to destructure it. So that would be a step you could skip, but your code's going to be a lot messier than what is on this page right here. And this is going to equal data. So that's going to equal all of our data. And now inside of this register user, right below this event prevent default, we're going to have a try catch block. So this just catches errors just in case our call to our endpoint doesn't work. And we're actually going to have to create an endpoint because we haven't created an endpoint yet. The only endpoint we have inside of our index.js is a GET request to a test endpoint. So we're going to have to create a register endpoint. I mean, you can name it whatever you want, but register is what we are doing, so we should name it that. So we could just do await axios right here. And it's going to be a post request because we are actually creating information into this endpoint. And then we need a string, and then we could just put register for now. It might break, it might not. It doesn't break. Cool. And then inside of this endpoint, we need to pretty much say the information we want to pass into this endpoint. And the information we want to pass in is username, email, password. Oh, let me do it all in one line. Password, first name. Oh my God. First name, last name, username, email, password, first name, last name, address, phone, and food. Okay, cool. So that's going to be everything we pass into our endpoint. So this is pretty much us going from the front end and sending the information to our backend endpoint of register. That's what we're doing right here. So that's going to be the try block. In the catch block, there's multiple things you can do. Also in the try block, we could do an alert. We could say registration successful, just to make sure it actually went through. You could remove this later if you want to actually use something more, you know, appealing, aesthetically appealing. And then also, if you could also navigate to like a certain page. So like you can navigate to a success page and it says, thank you for signing up. We will be in contact with you shortly. But we're not going to do that here. We're just going to leave it as is, because if I do that, I'm going to have to install the React Router DOM, set that up, and yada, yada, yada. So we're just going to leave this for now, but just know that's what you do here in this try block. So in the catch block, we take in the error as a parameter, and then we could do an alert of registration failed. And then below, we could just console log the error. So this will happen if this endpoint and all this information isn't working. We will catch the error right here. And I don't know why I have this axios.get right here, but let me remove that. Okay, cool. So this is our whole register user function right here. So anytime we click the submit button on the last page, this register user function is going to be called. So now we need to actually go into the backend, which is in our index.js, and we need to create this register route. We could keep the test right here. We'll just create it below this. We're going to put app.post. And let me just put a comment right before this. We are going to put register route. Register route. We can just put it like that. So we're going to do an app.post, a post request, and we're going to do /register endpoint, like we have on our front end already. We're going to take in a request and response. But before we do this, we need to make sure it's async await. Reason why is because we are using the MongoDB database. So request, response. We're going to do an arrow function. And then inside of this arrow function, we need to specify all the information we're getting again. So it's going to be username, email. Let me just make sure I'm getting everything right. Username, email, password. It'll be first name, last name, address, phone, and food. And that's going to equal the request body. So whatever we type in these inputs, that's how it's going to be. Your app will break here and there, as you can see, but then it also, when you're done typing and everything's correct, it'll start back up, and that's why it's really useful to use Nodemon. If you're just using regular stuff, you won't be able to track your backend pretty much at the same time live. So after we have the requested body, we are going to have a try catch right below this. So we're going to use all this information right below that we just entered. So in this try catch, the main thing we're doing here is we are going to send now the information to MongoDB and its database. And it's very simple. Let me just make this try catch real quick. So in the try, we're going to have a function, and we are going to have to pretty much use one of MongoDB's functions, which is user.create, and this will actually create the user. It's just the syntax that Mongo uses, and it's something you learn. So we're going to do const, and we could do user info, and this is going to be a wait user, and make sure you use a capital. So Oh my God. User. Make sure actually, did I import it? I don't know if I imported it. I didn't. That's why it's not doing it. So after you export it from inside the modules folder, we have the user.js. We exported the user model, but we never imported it into the index.js. So that's why I am not getting some auto completion here. So what we're going to do is we go here anywhere near the top. We're going to call user, const user equals require, and then we have to go inside of that folder. So for us, it should be in the models, and then there's only one folder in the models, which is user. Okay. Now we should be able to call in, and it turns green for me. User.create, and it auto completes for me as well. So we're going to do user.create, and the parameter is going to take an object, and then inside of this object, we're going to have the username, email, password, first name, last name, address. What was the other thing? What is the other thing? I'm drawing a blank. Phone and food. So it should match up to this right here, whatever is in the user. And if it doesn't, you're going to get an error as well. So email, username, email, password, first name, last name, address, phone, food. Okay. So now all we have to do is pretty much just finish this catch block right here, which we could just do a response with a status of 422, which is an error response, and then .json error. So that'll pop up there, and then we could just do, we could also do response here of JSON, and this could be user info, and that should give us all the information back in our response tab on the network. So now we could, let me make sure, I think that's everything. Everything should be working and connected. We are going to test it out, and if something doesn't work, we'll just debug it from there. Let me make sure. Wait. Okay, cool. All right, so we refreshed our UI, and everything should be connected. Our server is running. So let's test out. And one of the ways we could do it is we get the alerts to make sure everything's working right, and then we will also check our database. So one thing first is we're going to browse collections, and inside of our collections here is our users that we created. As you can see here, it says users, and we created that here where we called user. So here's all of our users right here, and this is a test. So users. Okay. So let's do some dummy data. Brett@gmail.com. 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. Brett Westwood 1 2 3 Main Street. Some random number, and favorite food, spaghetti. Okay. So now on this submit, everything should work, and like I said, if it doesn't, we'll debug it. So form submitted, so everything works. Registration failed. So we obviously messed up somewhere. What we can do is we can inspect and see what we messed up on. And I should have had this up and running earlier, but let's see. So registration failed. We got a pre-flight error, and we could click it and see what happened. Let me see. So everything we get everything in our payload, which is all our information. We don't get any response, and it's because I think we didn't download one package. So let me check that real quick. Okay, so one of the middlewares we didn't include inside, which I think is the reason why we're getting an error, is we have to go back in our index.js and we have to put app.use, and it's going to be express.json and then call as a function. So this allows us to actually use JSON inside of Express. If you don't do this, you're going to get errors as well. So let's just test this out again. So let me see. I might have to. Nope. And there we go. Registration successful. So these were our previous errors right here. And now if we look at everything, we have all of our information in our payload, which looks like all of our inputs. Our preview looks like it's working. And then there we go. So as you can see in the preview, MongoDB usually does an underscore ID. So there is our unique ID that MongoDB assigns us. Our response also is giving us a response to this. So everything should be working. If we check our cluster now and refresh this, we should have a new user, which is me. And as you can see right there, let me zoom in. We have an ID, a username, email, password, first name, last name, address, phone, food. So we're just going to do this one more time to show an example. And I'm just going to go a quick overview of what we did in both videos. So what we did is we created a front-end application using React. We created a multi-step form. And in this multi-step form, we did state management. And we sent it all to a component and page called form. And after we did this, we set up the backend. We connected it with Mongo. We connected it with Express. We made sure we added all the middleware we needed that was required to make this successful. And I'm going to do this one more time. So we could do tom12 and then tom@gmail.com. And then we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another thing we did is we also added a password hider. Pretty much it hides the password. And then we could see it as well to make sure we typed it in right. And we used React icons for these little eyes right here as well. We could press next. First name, Tom. Last name, we could put Tom2. 123 Main Street. Phone number, whatever. Favorite food, burger. We press submit. We get a form submitted. We get registration successful. We can inspect it real quick. Or actually, I'm a little too late on it. But we could go into our database in Mongo real quick to make sure everything got connected. And as you can see, now we have another user called Tom. So there you go. That's pretty much how you create a multi-step form with the MERN stacked. Obviously, we had some bugs in there that we had to deal with and fix, but that's just part of the coding process. I didn't want to cut that out. Obviously, it makes the video a bit longer, but I do have timestamps on the bottom, so you can skip through this video, watch the parts that you want to watch that are helpful to you, that you need help on, and rewatch parts that you need to rewatch. If you guys have any questions, just leave them down in the comments. I hope I was clear as I can be with describing how to create this multi-step form in React. Other than that, if you did find this video very valuable, subscribe to this channel. I'll be coming out with content on a weekly basis. Also, hit that like button so other people could see this video and they could be helped as well. And if you liked it, just let me know down in the comments that you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.